don't want the fight.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space.
What does it take to convince you that the dead do not always rest in peace?
Welcome to the Three Beards podcast. My name is Craig. Along with me is Austin and Chris. This episode has been brought to you by Brat's Beard Care, premium, high-quality, all-natural beard care. Go to bratsbeardcare.com. Kelly Brat, amazing stuff. I highly recommend it. We used it prior to him becoming a sponsor. So we are well into using this stuff, and if you check him out, you will not be sorry. And at this time, we would like to welcome our guests, Daniel and Teresa Duke, authors, researchers of the book, if people can see it, The Mysterious Life and Fake Death of Jesse James. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Hi.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I just have to, just right off the bat, when I got this, we have a mutual friend, Mark Eddy, who sent me a clip of his interview with you guys. And I'm going to let you guys kind of take the floor and just kind of go from that in the beginning. But just from my perspective, and like the guys, when we were talking about this, we know just pretty much probably what I would say 95% of most people know about Jesse James. Here's an outlaw riding around, holding up trains, holding up stagecoaches, robbing banks, just causing chaos across the West, and everybody's just like, he's the epitome of the West, the old, like the West gangster, just pistols of fire, and when I was watching your interview, I was just like, oh my God, I didn't even know that part. And when you guys started from the first years, like how it began when he was 14 and went from there. And that's what I said. I'll let you guys take it from there, because anybody that's never seen it before, oh my God, wait till you hear it.
Yeah, I was amazed. I'm like, it gets crazier. And it's just when I thought I heard it all, I heard more. And I'm like, oh, wow, it gets crazy. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Lots of rabbit holes on this journey.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So basically from what I've started out, so here we are. We're on a farm, if I'm not mistaken. It is in Missouri, correct?
That's right.
Correct.
So,
Yep.
yeah. Go from there. The Union thugs roll into the farm, and there we go.
All right. Well, a lot of people don't realize the fighting in Missouri and Kansas took place. It started about 10 years before the official start of the Civil War. And, they'd been, Kansas Jayhawkers would raid into Missouri, and the Missouri guys would raid them back. And, it just is tit for tat back and forth for over a decade. And then by the time the war started, fighting there had gotten just downright brutal. It was bloodthirsty. After 10 years of raiding one another, murders, all the bad stuff. And Jesse was 14. He was too young to fight. And he was plowing on the fields when some Union-backed guerrillas rode onto their farm, and they strapped him to a plow, beat him severely, rode to the farmhouse, and his mom was pregnant at the time, and they pushed her around. And accounts vary on what they did to her. Some say they strapped her to a tree and whipped her. Others say they just pushed her around. But they hung his stepfather, Dr. Reuben Samuel, and they wanted to find where Frank was. Frank was fighting for the regular Confederate forces, and they wanted to find Frank. They wouldn't tell where he was, so they hung the stepfather, and they didn't kill him. After they rode off, he was cut down, and he had permanent brain damage. And Jesse wanted revenge, nobody would take him at the age of 14 because he was too young. And he finally found a group who would take him, and that was Quantrell's guerrillas. And from there, he was very good at what he did. All the guerrillas were very good at killing, and that's what they did for throughout the Civil War. They just rode around killing Yankees, Yankee sympathizers, Yankee guerrillas, just back and forth. And there, it wasn't so much politics with Jesse. It was more, from what I've gathered and all the research we've had, it was more just getting revenge against the people who attacked them. And, like after the war, when they started the James Younger gang, there was Cole Younger, Jim and Bob Younger. They, before it all started, they were Union supporters, the Younger family. And what got them involved, they wanted revenge too, because their dad was riding into town to do business. He was a Union supporter, and some Union guerrillas murdered and robbed him. So, they just, with that whole group in that area, it was more getting revenge against the people who burned you out. And they made his mother stand in the yard while they burned their house, the Younger mother. It was just, it was real brutal.
Yeah, it's not a wonder that here's a kid. I mean, you think about just the change. I mean, we may not have known about Jesse James.
Yeah.
Here's something. I mean, you could see it's like, obviously nobody's excusing, killing, robbing, anybody that's killed. But when you think about it, I mean, a simple act of, had he not been there, had they picked another farm, had they gone for somebody else, we may not have this mysterious, figure that is the Jesse James of our, American force. I'm just blown away with just the change, like the Younger. I mean, the fact that the Union soldiers picked the guy that supports them and murdered him, created this, put even more fuel into this gang and what their actions did.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Destiny. It was all destiny, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and like you're right. His dad, Jesse and Frank's real father, Robert Say Lee James, was a Baptist minister, and he was one of the founders of William Jewell College, which is in Liberty, Missouri. And they, they would have probably, like you said, nobody would have known him. It would have been at most a footnote in history. And,
Yep.
Another possible, at most probably Confederate soldier, that was involved in the war. And and as I was reading, like one of the stories, like I really wanted to get to you guys is, especially when everybody reads this book, I'm not going to give away all the stuff, because you got to buy the book, go to where books are anywhere, Amazon, like I did, Amazon, next day delivery, Prime, gets brought to your door. You can read it easy. So when I was looking at one of the ones from that last interview too, that bank robbery, where I want to say the name of I apologize, the name, I want to say was it Wymore?
Jack Wymore.
Yeah, that was killed. And when you guys went and toured there, I wanted to ask you about, so what do you think? Tell that story, and we'll get to that, because I want to kind of talk a little bit about not being able to see the letter.
Okay.
Yeah, so tell that story when you guys went to tour there.
All right. We went to the whole family. We all drove up to Missouri. We went to Liberty, and we wanted to tour that bank building. It's open for tours. And, they were going on and on about, what happened. The James brothers, the James gang they robbed the bank. And when they were riding out of town, and, there was a 17-year-old guy, he didn't speak good English. His name was Jack Wymore. I think he was Swedish. And they told him to move. He probably was scared to death and just froze. And one of the gang shot him dead right there. They just shot him and rode right over. And so fast forward to when we were there, they said there was a letter. Jesse had written a letter apologizing for the death of Wymore. And, they felt bad about it. They apologized for it. And it didn't make it go away, but, at least he was showing some remorse. So we just asked if we could see the letter, just to compare the handwriting, his handwriting, with our family, the handwriting we have of him. And they said, well, we're sorry. The owner, it troubles him too much to think about even letting people see the letter. It's like it really bothers him. I thought, that's a little. It doesn't trouble you too much to have the museum and give tours, but the letter's a whole different story. I didn't understand that.
That's
So it just,
hogwash.
yeah, I
Yeah.
thought so too.
Well, and that was kind of where I wanted to talk to you guys about, because I wanted to expand on that a little bit. I mean, how does somebody? I mean, it's one of the things you can be disturbed by, a family member from generations ago, but something that happened to my great relative is not going to affect me to where if you two come up to me and say, "Hey, I'd really like to see this letter," I'm like, "Yeah, I've got it in this dusty box. Yeah, check it out and see it." I go, I'm not going to be like, "No. It's just I can't deal with this right now."
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
It's not like they personally knew their ancestor.
Yeah, he was, the way he made it sound like, I'm too emotional about this. It's like it just happened yesterday. It's I was like,
it's going to drive me to drinking or something. It's just that doesn't make sense to me, so.
Like, you have two historians that are wanting to talk about, and bring your relative that until this book came and you saw your interview, I didn't even know who he was. I didn't even know that name.
Yeah.
Like I said, I just knew James in the James game. I didn't know this kid's name. And so all of a sudden, here's a 17-year-old kid that now I'm thinking of, what a better way to shine more light on the tragedy that befell somebody that was just potentially just walking in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And now you can make, you can get his story. Oh yeah, he was a good kid that was just going to pick up groceries for mom and got shot down by the James gang.
I mean, I wouldn't even think they wanted to help you even more, because you're part of the James family, and he could have made history by putting his information with your information and made it even better. Do you actually think that he has the letter, or the letter was written somewhere else, or you don't know?
I don't know. They never would show us. So, and they claim they have this and that, but they never really show the proof. So it's kind of up in the air. I don't know if they have it or not.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, as we go, like I said, I want you guys to hit kind of long. We'll kind of skip along just one due time. I think we're going to have you guys on again, because I'd want to touch on your previous book as well, The Temple of Treasure. So I said, once this thing, if you guys are willing, I would love to have you part two, have you guys come back on and we'll expand on there. But as we go down, so here, he's him and the gang, are robbing train stuff, and you guys hit on the fact that this was almost, I would say, a little bit where it was almost like you kind of talked about celebrity / almost like a Robin Hood mystique when they'd get on the train, because you talked about people wanted autographs. They want at this time, if this was modern time, this would be people like, "Can I get a picture with you?" People, it's like, "Hold on a second, you mind if I take this photo?"
Yeah, his legend, I mean, it's lasted for centuries. I mean, he really just, I think it was he a lot of bold and daring acts, and he elevated into like a Robin Hood status with some, and then with others, more of a villain. He was famous or infamous, depending on how you looked at it.
I was talking with the guys. I mean, it's weird, like the stuff I pick up and I hang on. I'm looking at the dollar amounts, and I was starting to add the stuff up in my head. Just even the base amounts. That's a lot of money, even for today's standards.
Yeah.
Let alone 1880s, and you're having. I mean, if I rough number, like I was looking, I was already up to almost $200,000 that these guys stole.
A lot of money.
Yeah, and I'm like, can you imagine? Those guys were living like kings back then.
Yeah, I told Craig I was thinking about joining the military to go to Texas to see if I can look for them gold bars. Hey, can I get stationed in Texas? I want to get stationed in Texas, and then you come to find out it's under the general's quarters, and you're like, hey, how am I gonna get in there to find it? I mean, hey. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit. Has anybody, like, I know you don't really, have they looked at the books or tried to figure out the mapping of it, or do you think that it's still there on the base?
Yeah, I believe it's there. I don't have any reason to not believe it's there. Of course, I haven't. If anybody was smart and found it, I would probably never know anyway. So, but I have a feeling it's there, just because the way the story was told to us by one of the men who helped bury it. When he was a kid, he helped him move 700 bars of gold. Jesse kept 20 for himself, and they buried 680 bars, each weighing about 15 pounds each. That's a lot of gold. And today, I think the price is around 1,800 an ounce right now. Mm-hmm. So that's a whole lot of money. Just in one catch. But I've been to several sites that have been recovered that was even more gold than that. But the state got that, and I don't know who all was involved completely. We got bits and pieces of the story. They showed us the location, and then any other deeper questions that they didn't know the answer, or they wouldn't comment.
There was even rumors that he buried some treasure in his front yard, and he even had to watch some of his own grandkids because they were always trying to dig it up behind his back.
Yeah. Well, when he died,
even has it that,
when he died when he died in 1943, half of his kids stayed at home digging up the yard instead of going to the funeral. So he had a lot of gold, and a lot, I guess families get that way. They were wanting their inheritance before anybody else dug it up, I guess. So,
wow.
But yeah.
Let's say you come across this gold. Do you think you would keep it and try to sell it to an historian because it's Jesse James gold, or would you get more money just gold? That's what. Or would the state come by and just take it from you? Yeah,
that's a good question. I know there's an Antiquities Act, and that basically covers any treasure found that's older than 100 years would fall under the Antiquities Act, and that turns into a tricky spot.
I'm like Harrison Ford, that famous line where he says it belongs in a museum.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I wouldn't mind having a portion of it, but I do think a lot of the treasure, it's historical, and I don't know. I just kind of believe it belongs in a museum.
Yeah.
Where people can benefit from the history.
But like the treasure that George Roming, the older gentleman, told us about, he was involved in burying it when he was a kid. That doesn't fall under the Antiquities Act yet. Still got about 10, 15 more years for that. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't know how that would play out. But I'm sure I'm under the impression that if a politician heard about it, they'd be all over it. They'd do something to try to put their hands on it.
Yeah,
I agree with Teresa. I'm like, it needs to be in a museum, but what I would do, I'm just telling you, it's called, you have a nice little furnace over next to you, you toss them in there, and you melt it down, and you forge your own bar. Where'd you get that? I was painting gold.
Yeah.
Really
That's true.
Really successful.
Good idea.
Yeah, no, that's a terrible idea.
Oh boy.
Yeah, no, it's so
I like that way of thinking too.
Yeah, it's a terrible. Like I said, it belongs in a museum, not in the hands of not like that.
Yeah.
But so here you have you go through, these guys are successful, and I was looking up. I'm trying to remember the last, because you guys kind of hit on it, and I do agree with you guys that Jesse James was not at that last robbery that went bad, where everybody in Minnesota knew, because it's just like you said, everybody, you can't, because it's just like there's patterns. Like anybody that does profiling, you see, this thing is meticulously planned out. I mean, these guys are brazen, just outright. They don't care. Modern time YOLO. You don't care who you're riding past. I'll let you, that story. The name's failing me right now, but the speaker, where everybody from town was at that speech, and they were actually upset that James and his gang were interrupting the speech as they rode by. So go ahead.
Yeah. That Henry Clay Dean, he was a Copperhead Copperhead politician, and he was from the North, Southern sympathizer, and Mark Twain had described him as a filthy man who he gave better speeches than anybody, but he was known for being he looked like a dirty bum walking around, but he had a cane with a snake on top of it, a brass copperhead, and he would give speeches, and it would draw people from miles around, like 50 miles around. And back in those days, 50 miles was, like a 2-day trip at least. So
it was a long way.
Yeah, real long way. So he was giving a speech on the background of this story. The townspeople wanted a railroad to come through town. It would increase their business, make them all more prosperous. But the only people who the people who were against it were the bankers, the Achabach brothers, who ran the Achabach Bank in Corydon, Iowa. And so they were against it. They wouldn't give money. They had more money than anybody else. It sounded to me like they were the ones, their decision would make or break the railroad plans. So they wouldn't give their money. Henry Clay Dean comes to town to give a speech. He's on the other side of town, which drew the whole town away from the bank to his speech.
Brilliant.
In. Yeah, they just walk in, take all the money, and they were you're just sauntering through the crowd. When they were riding out of town, they were at an easy pace, walked by, said, "Hey, somebody just robbed the bank." And people shut them up. They said, there's a speech going on. Let us hear this, quit interrupting. And they laughed and rode out of town. And by the time the townspeople figured out they were actually robbed, the James gang was long gone. And if you just kind of fitting the whole story together, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to wonder if Henry Clay Dean didn't help them out serve as a distraction in supporting them to get the money to have the railroad put through. So in a way, they were kind of helping half the town when they did that. But that's just speculation. There's no facts on that, and that kind of thing. It's hard to find any facts or proof tying them all together. But it played out too well. It seemed like everything was planned down to the T.
A well meticulated plan.
Yeah.
Now, I'll let you guys frame how you want to get to this point. So, here we are at this point. Now we're approaching about the time when supposedly James is killed. And so, like I said, I'll let you guys go from here, because I know this is one of the big things about your book too, is because now is when we bring in the whole wood height. And we bring in this whole thing. So I'll let you guys, kind of go from here and let people know. But this is the part where, like I said, you start feeling the tingles on your back of your neck. I'm like, this is the part that's cool. Like I didn't know anything about. And now we have, here is, be the conspiracy. Here is the thing. Was that him in the box? We don't know.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So
supposedly purportedly, history says he was assassinated in April 3rd, 1882. But we have reason to believe it was his cousin Wood Height, who was conveniently shot and killed around the same time that they said Jesse James was shot and killed. So there were a lot of similarities, and we believe it was Wood Height who was actually shot and killed. And it gave Jesse a chance to, escape under a new identity as James L. Courtney and move to Texas.
And we've got that picture right up here. Austin can bring that up in the show. So here's that one, if you guys could see. So there's that one with the coffin where you've got on the right-hand side, you have what you guys believe, and it does really bear a semblance between Frank James over there and him. Mm-hmm. And then you've got Mom sitting right next to him. So, I mean, that would be, when I looked at this photo, the way she's positioned is not somebody who's looking at a casket mourning a loved one. It's more like, you're more like, this is what you'd be like if a family member was killed, like, I could see like parents, like if a parent was mourning the death of one of their siblings, they would be leaning into another family member. And that's what that looks like to me, I think it's Zerelda is how you say her name. It looks like she is kind of in that posture of, this is somebody super close to me, lean to them. And that's why I said not somebody who's looking at a casket mourning the death of her son.
She's looking
That's
like
a great observation.
she's looking like to me like, how do you think you're gonna get away with this? She's looking at him like, okay, buddy, we're gonna roll with it.
Yeah. What were you thinking? No.
Yeah. So, we kind of glossed over it. One of the things too is, we could touch, kind of wind back a little bit, like what actually happened to Mom, that kind of really fueled, kind of the kickoff of the things. And I'll let you guys explain that one. You'll do better than I did.
Well, at the beginning when Jesse was 14, she was roughed up, but after, at the end of and I'm trying to go back quickly, but she, at the end of the Civil War, they all tried to turn themselves in. Jesse tried to surrender at Lexington, Missouri, and a Union picket just opened fire on him. All the guerrillas were hunted down like dogs. They were branded. They didn't get granted amnesty, and they were to be, if they turned themselves in, they were to be executed. And if they didn't, they were to be hunted down and killed. And so he tried to turn himself in, got a bullet through his right lung, somehow survived. And that was the second time he'd had a bullet through the same lung. And he lived twice. So, that started his career. It was either leave the country or stay and fight. And they lived up to their bandit, their outlaw name or the brand they were branded with. So, fast forwarding through that, they'd gone on for years, robbing banks, over 15 years, robbing banks, getting away. Nobody could identify them. The Pinkertons and all the other law enforcement who were chasing them couldn't find them. Well, one of the Pinkerton agents had a bright idea to spy on them, and he stopped at an inn, and the inn was owned by one of Jesse's relatives. It was a former Sheriff Courtney. Well, the Pinkerton guy, he was a young guy. He was wanting to bust the James gang, and he told of his plans. The next day, he was found dead on the side of the road. He told Jesse's cousin. Word got out, and somebody killed him. I don't know if it was the James boys or if it was, the Courtney himself. So, but somebody killed him. The Pinkertons were mad. They retaliated. They raided Jesse's mother's farmhouse, threw a bomb through the window, and it killed Jesse's 9-year-old brother. Blew off her arm. Yeah, it killed Archie Samuels. It was Jesse's half brother, 9-year-old Archie. Blew the mother's arm off at the elbow, and it maimed his stepfather's hand. So he was already brain damaged from years earlier, but it messed him up. And the Pinkertons didn't play around. They were also known for blowing up miners who went on strike. When miners went on strike, they'd blow them up.
Union busters. God, I mean, so here we have, it's no wonder that these guys, like you said, can't turn yourself in. There's no way you're going to be redeemed. So why not, all I just go out in a blaze of glory? Yeah. Why not just, because what else do we have to lose? Either way, we're going to get shot.
Yep.
So might as well try to, because you can see it's like you're not condoning it, but you could see. If I'm already branded as an outlaw, why not at least enjoy the privileges of being an outlaw?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And so it was.
I go leading up to the funeral. We believe it was Wood Height who was killed, and the way Wood Height was killed, historically, the historically accepted version, he was having a love triangle. He was caught in some kind of love triangle with Bob and Charlie Ford's sister. Her name was Martha Bolton. She had a farm. She was seeing Wood Height, who was Jesse's first cousin, and everybody says he bore a strong resemblance to Jesse. And she had a relationship with her farmhand, Jim Gibson. So Jim and Wood get in a fight. There's a shootout. And both Jim and Wood get killed. Wood was shot in the back of the head, just like the corpse that who was passed off as Jesse. What a lot of people don't realize is Jesse tried to fake his death a few years earlier in 1879, and George Shepard, one of the gang members, allegedly shot Jesse in the back of the head, rode into town, and he wanted to collect the reward. But the posse went out and tried to find the body. They couldn't find the body, so nobody believed them. And there were reports in the Galveston News back in the day. Zerelda then also said, "Yeah, my poor son George Shepard killed him." She was going along with it. And
Wow.
yeah, the Galveston paper reported that she had gone along with his alleged death so many times she wasn't a reliable witness. So she was trying to protect her son. So, but yeah, so Woodhite gets killed, Jim Gibson gets killed. Then they claim Jesse one night. Bob and Charlie allegedly killed Jesse, shot him in the back of the head at point blank range with a 44. And he was probably 6 feet from Jesse. About 6 feet from Jesse, extended his arm, shot him in the back of the head with a 44. If that was a 44 and the bullet never exited the head, now that doesn't even add up with a 44. That he would have had no face left.
None.
He'd have a head canoe.
Goes in like this, come out like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there was even state of New Mexico, one of their firearms experts had investigated the claim, the way it went down, and she said there's no way it could have gone down like that. There would have been blood all over the wall. Most of his head would have been all over the wall, and he would.
Yeah.
The bullet definitely would have exited. So so next day, Bob and Charlie Ford go and turn themselves in. They were pardoned quickly by the governor. I'm trying to keep everything in line here chronologically. They call.
I'm sorry, I'm screwing you up.
Oh no, it's my. There's so many paths that lead off from the story. It's hard for me to keep right on the point. But so Bob and Charlie turn themselves in. They're displaying the body of Jesse down in the streets in a coffin, and they're claiming Jesse James is dead. The only people who could identify him were his family and his family members and his fellow gang members. Nobody else had an accurate description of him. And his family was loyal to him, and so were the gang. And those who weren't loyal were probably scared to death because they would have known Frank would have killed them if they would have gone against their story. I mean, there's a lot of fear and loyalty mixed in with that. So, go ahead.
Yeah, what are the odds that when they say Jesse's shot, that they find his cousin who was also getting they were doing what is it called, where an exhumation, not an exhumation, but at the time Jesse was reportedly shot, they were
inquest.
They found inquest. Thank you. Lost me for a minute, but they were doing an inquest on his cousin at the same time. I mean, it's just
wow.
It's just weird. It's weird stuff.
Yeah, and they supposedly, they found Woodhite's body was found conveniently the day he was killed. The day they claimed Jesse was killed. They displayed Jesse's body, but they didn't display Woodhite's. And back then, when they killed outlaws, they put them on. They made a show of it, pulled people in, everybody wanted to see. I mean, you can go to. Yeah, all those old West books. Anytime any outlaw was killed, they were paraded. They were set up in the streets, and people probably made money off of it. And we believe it was Woodhite passed off as Jesse, and the guy who they said was Woodhite when they brought him in was the farmhand Jim Gibson. He just disappeared from history altogether. And to this day, Woodhite came from a well-to-do family in Kentucky. They had a lot of money. They were an upstanding family for that time period. They wouldn't have just abandoned their son. I mean, their whole family were supporters of the James gang. They wouldn't have just abandoned him. And to this day, you can't find a grave of Woodhite. We believe that's because he was buried as Jesse.
And that's where we'll get into the mysterious life. And now we're into the faked death part of this thing, where we start looking at some of the ones. Like I said, I'll let you guys kind of take it like what you found, because some of the things that were really interesting to me was additional body parts, the casket, other creature, other animal parts that are being tested and being declared as, body parts. And so go there, like what you guys have found in your research on this. Okay.
Let's see, skipping forward to the exhumation in 1995. First of all, Jesse was buried. The alleged Jesse, historical story. He was buried in 1882 at the James Farm outside of Kearney, Missouri. Now it's the James Farm and Museum. In when was that, Terry? 1902? 1902, right? They exhumed the grave and moved it to Mount Olivet Cemetery in town a few miles away. So they moved the grave. they move his grave, they rebury him, and then in 1978, the curator of the James Farman Museum, at the Farman Museum, he did an amateur archaeological dig, dug up parts of the yard and the area around the original grave. And he found a dog tooth, a hog tooth, a human tooth, and some animal bones. And he put them all in a Tupperware jar and saved them in his desk. And he would pass out some of the bones to his friends and people he wanted to impress. So,
Wow.
so there's that. That's the little Tupperware, and just set the Tupperware aside for a second. Then 1995, they come out. They're like, we're going to claim once or prove once and for all through DNA that Jesse died as history stated he did. So they get this professor from George Washington University. He's a law professor. He has no background, no professional background in forensics or archaeology or anything. You would think they would hire a forensic anthropologist or something like that. No, they hire a law professor. So and he made this big show. He dug up the grave, and they find male bones and male clothes and female bones and female clothes, all in the same grave. It's like a mass grave almost. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, it gets weirder. They can't find any DNA from that grave, and so he supposedly can't extract any DNA from it. So they ask him, why don't you exhume Jesse's mother and get her DNA, because she carries the mitochondrial DNA you're looking for. So he claims, and this is a law professor, claims that violates Missouri law that states you can't be exhumed unless you died under suspicious circumstances. There's no such law. We called them on that. My mother called the Missouri state attorney or attorney general's office, and they found, she asked him, is there a law in Missouri that states that can't be done? They said there's no such law. And you'd think, George Washington University law professor should know that kind of thing. I'm sure he had access.
Yeah.
And then later on, he admitted that he embellished on that story. Yeah.
Embellished. Yeah.
She called him out on it.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet.
So then you
and one thing I want to make a point of. Originally, when he died, they buried him at the farm. But when they decided to take him to Mount Olivet, when they did the first exhumation in 1978, it was his family. They were surrounded by him, and they were going to take him to Mount Olivet. But the interesting thing is, when they buried his body, he was facing down, and it just seems like if it was my family, someone I cared about, I wouldn't want to bury him face down. It was just weird things like that. There's just so much little things that makes you stop and think, what? Why would they do that? Yeah. So that was just a thing I wanted to point out too, that he was buried face down.
And the casket they found didn't match the casket Jesse was known to have been buried in. So even the casket didn't match. So Teresa had mentioned earlier to me that they had they used to move the headstones around. So they don't even know for sure if that was the right grave they were digging up.
There was a lot.
And okay, so they didn't get any DNA from the grave. The guy who was the Clay County commissioner at the time, Stephen Caruso, he's an attorney today in Kansas City. He was against the exhumation. He said he called it a tawdry sideshow. And he told my mother, and I drove up to talk to him, and he had told us that when Professor Stars, he wasn't even a doctor, Professor Stars, the guy who was heading the exhumation, subpoenaed the court so that he could get a hair or a sample of hair and a tooth that allegedly belonged to Jesse. Well, Stephen Caruso was holding that for the James Farman Museum. Court ordered Stephen Caruso to hand that over, and he was a Clay County commissioner. He said it was a tawdry sideshow. He didn't agree with anything that was going on. So instead of turning over the hair, he pulled the hair that was tested out of his friend's head, John Hartman. John Hartman was the Clay County Parks director. He pulled his hair and submitted that, and they tested it at Penn State. They tested John Hartman's hair, And when on the documentaries, they claimed that the DNA they extracted from the tooth. Oh, and he told us the tooth had he didn't go into details on where he got the tooth, but he said it had the same origins of the hair he turned in, similar origins. So I don't know where he got the tooth, but when they tested the DNA, they came out and said we've proven with 99.9% accuracy this was Jesse James, and history was right that he died in 1882. There's no proof. I mean,
So
the whole thing was a circus.
yeah. Yeah. So basically, there was like no chain of custody when they did the DNA testing.
Yeah.
They based their findings off of some relatives that there's some question about if they're really directly related to Jesse James against the tooth and hair that were questionable as well about the sources of where they got it. So all the conclusions, it was a joke, basically. Everything that their findings, they didn't prove Jesse James died, was shot and killed in April 3rd, 1882.
Yeah, I mean, the way you're describing it is like, I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped the sample there at Penn State and they just called a grad student over, plucked their hair, and like, oh yeah, we'll test that.
So what?
Yeah.
God. So what's the reason?
And that's basically.
Yeah. And Chris, what were you saying?
So what is the reason why you think they don't want to change history? I mean, the facts are facts, and I mean, what is the big reason? Because you've done countless hours of research and countless hours of this and countless. So what is the reason why you don't think they want to change history? Can't you all have the body excavated yourself, or because that is your family, or because basically
we've tried. we tried to get we tried to get James L. Courtney exhumed, but it was shot down. Well, every step we take to try to prove it, it seems like there's some kind of block. There's a block.
Well,
but I mean,
go ahead. Well, I mean, sorry.
He's a little late. That's awesome.
Go ahead and finish. I'm listening.
When you ask like why they wouldn't want that out, the only thing I can come up with is money. Back in the late 90s, the James Farman Museum was bringing in around $7 million a year in tourist dollars. That was a lot of money. That was in the late 90s. So, and that was every year. They've got visitors from all over the world. And for some reason, he's real popular in Germany. Jesse James is. And I thought, well, he and David Hasselhoff. So.
What's going on in Germany? They like Hasselhoff and James. I mean, what?
Yeah. So, but I think the money would play a big role in it, and I have a feeling they felt threatened, like it would take away. And we tried to explain, Jesse was born and raised there. Most of what he did, to gain notoriety, centered around the James farm. So I don't think it would really take that much away from it. But apparently, that's the only thing I can come up with is money. I know he was involved with other groups. I don't know if that plays a role somehow. But I know, like under his alias here in Texas, he was a Freemason. But I don't see how that could fall into that at all. I really don't. So
yeah, and I know one thing. Like I said, this for me, it seems like a pretty good segue too. Like some of the evidence that you guys use, and this was Frank James is shot, and so now he's in. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong here. That was during the Minnesota robbery.
Yeah, and he got shot in the knee.
Yeah, so now I'll let you guys expand from there. And this kind of, for me, this is one of the ones that really cemented where I started to believe that as well, is why would somebody from here, well, starts in Minnesota, and I'll let you guys explain where he goes, and I'll let the audience and stuff kind of follow that same train like I did, where like, ooh, I'm a believer.
Well, yeah, Jesse, when they were robbed, a lot of their robberies throughout their whole career, they'd have, there would be two robberies within a couple of hundred miles of the banks would be several hundred miles apart. And it was both would be attributed to the James gang. And, and that also helped keep any descriptions of Jesse really confused, because like Wood Height, his first cousin, would lead one of the gangs and they'd hit one bank while while Jesse and the others were hitting a second bank in another state. And that fell in line with their guerrilla tactics. Basically, the guerrilla warfare was great training for how to rob banks later in their outlaw career. And they'd hit multiple targets at once, and it would keep people confused. The Pinkertons were confused, and nobody could catch them. So when they hit Northfield, according to our diary, the family diary that we have from Jesse, he was at home on his farm. In his diary, he was at home on his farm in Blevins, Texas. And it made sense to us that, like you had mentioned earlier, the MO was it wasn't the way the robbery was pulled off was a lot different than any robbery they had done. Historians like to chalk that up to, well, they got sloppy and greedy. And I don't see, they were so careful. They eluded capture for over 15 years, and then they would just completely break off from their normal MO and go do this, pull a wild robbery. It just doesn't make sense to me. But I'm sure it could happen. But Woodhite was leading that. Frank was with him. There was other gang members like Archie Clements and the younger brothers. Archie was shot and killed. The younger brothers got shot up, and they ended up in prison. They couldn't get away. They were too shot up. Frank got away, and they said Jesse. I think it was Frank and Woodhite that got away. Frank in Minnesota gets away and hops a train and rides a train down to Texas. Why would you've got a bullet in your knee. Why would you ride all the way to Texas instead of stopping somewhere, any number of places that were a lot closer? So he rides to Texas, and according to the news reports of the day, Jesse met him in Waco, and they went to Jesse's ranch outside of Waco, which falls perfectly in line with Jesse living in Blevins, Texas, 30 miles south of Waco. And then our mother discovered a photograph showing Jesse, Frank James's wedding when he married Annie. It was the whole family: Jesse, Jesse and Frank's wives, Zarel, their mom and their stepfather, and several other people were. And the photo is at his house in Blevins, Texas. And we couldn't believe it. We thought, this is like a dream come true. Found a picture of him at his home in Blevins. So that was big. And then for a retired game warden who's currently a sheriff's deputy in Pecos County, Texas, his family came from there. He identified his great-grandfather in the photo. He said his great-grandfather lived in Blevins after the Civil War. He said he was so sick of walking, he never traveled anywhere else, so he wouldn't have traveled to go even to a wedding. He stayed there. His farm was next door to Jesse's. So, and he's in the photo too. So we've got people who grew up in the area identifying their family members in the same photo with Jesse and his house in Blevins, the whole thing. That was a big key. It was like the smoking gun we were looking for.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. That was kind of where just like you said, so here's a guy gets shot in the knee. Like you said, I'm like, if he's evading, you want to evade capture, you want to just get out of there. There's so many, you hook a right. You go into the Wild West, you go into the West where they're not looking for you there.
Yeah.
Colorado, Dakotas, nobody's looking for you over this way. So, we're not talking Amtrak bullet train here. I mean, we're talking train stopping everywhere along the line. You have so many chances of being recognized.
Yep.
You have so many chances of stuff, and not like I said, and you got a bullet in your knee.
Exactly.
And I'm like,
that would be a big red flag.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking without just ruffling my head. I mean, we're probably talking at least 1,200, 1,300 miles.
Yeah, that's a long trip. And like you said, on the trains back in those days, it was a slow trip.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, and the whole time, bullet in your knee. Yeah, no, it's just. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, he had a destination in mind. There was an end, and it made complete sense where he said that Blevins, Texas thing. Why that spot of all places to go? You chose Waco, Texas, which is right there. Yeah, I mean, I was at that point. I'm like, yeah, I get exactly how you guys drew that, correlation right there. It's like this has got to be something to this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think he had a lot of connections there. I know it seems like they had a lot of just connections to Texas that led them there. But it provided a great way to escape all the heat going on in Missouri.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. So, is this about the time where, I mean, throughout the whole part, was he kind of burying stuff? Because I can imagine, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're not walking around carrying this paper as a guy riding up on a horseback.
Yeah,
It's going to draw. And we kind of glossed over it too, where you guys are convinced, and I'm thinking there's a good chance that possibly Major John Newman Edwards was that guy that was tipping him off.
Yeah, he could have been easily tipping them off.
Because reporter, you're going to be at the cable stations, with
yeah.
And so it would not be hard for you to be, as you're getting ready to file your report, be watching there and seeing the guy saying, transporting gold to this part, stop. And he'd just be like, hey, I need you to transmit. Hey, the yellow stuff is going to be on, number 92.
Yep.
And, all of a sudden, bam, you got the robbery.
It was very organized.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so is there still word that, there might be these squirrel caches, like, across, basically across the Midwest, just in different places that still haven't been discovered?
Yeah. When it comes to the treasure part of it, Jesse was a big part, but he wasn't the only player in the treasures. That spans centuries of different groups, all tied in. They tie in with the Freemasons, and nothing against the Freemasons, in my opinion. I think, Jesse wasn't an angel by any means, but people say, some people find it hard to believe that Jesse had any connections with Freemasons or the Templar. And, the Templar themselves, I always point out, they were outlaws themselves. After the church, squashed them in 1307, they were outlaws. And a lot of them became, and it's widely known, a lot of Templar turned into pirates. So, there was a lot of outlaws long before Jesse. And when he joined, there's ties in there that are there's certain ties that would be very hard to prove, but everything fits. And the thing that got me was when I was locating the treasures, there's a template that the treasures fall on. Every treasure that I knew that was tied with Jesse fits on the template. Treasures that the Attorney General of the state of Texas, former Attorney General Wagner Carr, had his driver show my mother and me where two large treasures were recovered. And according to the driver, the Texas Rangers got it. End of story. We don't know anything else after that. They weren't going to tell us. But then there's treasures like Victoria Peak in New Mexico, an alleged treasure vault, Manly Palmer. And I'm starting to get, this is where there's so many paths and rabbit holes to go down. Really start.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to keep myself in line. Jesse played an important role, and his treasures are buried on this template, but so are the treasures of other outlaws and different people throughout history.
Really?
In the Americas. Yeah. It's a wild story. For example, here's one example that ties in other people. Jesse, in his diary, he mentioned, he never wrote his feelings or anything. It was just dry facts. Went to Shreveport. He and the boys went to Shreveport. Some of the guys he mentioned were known gang members, historically accepted known gang members. They went to Shreveport. They hopped the steamer. I think its name was the Amelia LaBarge, and so they went south to Natchitoches, Louisiana, got off the boat, and were on the Louisiana side and took a road heading north, the opposite direction they just traveled. They stopped at a man's house. His name was Gervais Fontenot. So I started researching, who's this Gervais Fontenot? Did they know him or not? I didn't know. I checked into him, and they did know him, but he was a retired U.S. Marshal. But at the same time, he was the nephew of Jean Lafitte, the famous pirate. He was Jean Lafitte. And I thought, my God, all of this right here, the names in the diary, all it takes is a little research and boom, he's Jean Lafitte's nephew. Jean Lafitte, when I was looking into him, I was curious as to whether or not he'd had any Masonic ties at all. When he helped us defeat the British in New Orleans, he had and this is established history. It said that he had Masonic communications with Andrew Jackson. Lafitte the pirate did. And that's a whole different story, but it was just trying to illustrate how it was like an underground network, and some of the biggest names in outlaw history or pirate history tie in with this network. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Interesting.
Well, like I said, as we're wrapping up here, but we're definitely gonna, we'll have to have you guys in talk about that treasure side of it too, because I'm just like, I'm like, dude, I can just listen to this for a while.
There's so much. There's a lot of intrigue and suspense with this story, and there's still a lot of things that we ourselves don't know, that we have little tidbits that we want to go down and explore, but it's been very intriguing.
Quick question before we wrap up, did you ever go down the rabbit hole of finding out what lodge he belonged to? Because I'm a Freemason. Everything is usually in archives, so if you touch bases back to a lodge, you might be able to find the history of where he was actually in the minutes of being in a meeting as an outlaw or whatever.
Yeah, he was at Carolina Lodge in Falls County, Texas.
Okay.
I'm a Mason too, so nice to meet you, brother.
Nice to meet you, brother, traveler.
Yeah, see.
I also had it was one of his grandsons who lived to be like super old. He told us that he was also part of some lodge. What was it, Danny? The Red Man or something?
Oh, that was a different. He was also a member of the Improved Order of Red Men, and that was a side group.
So he was. Yeah, so he was little groups all throughout, but yeah, very interesting stuff.
Very, very interesting.
Then we had a question there. This would be for you, like when you're looking, are guests also recorded in those logs? So, like, if Jesse was to go there, would he, somebody who's in there, would they have recorded, like, Jesse? Would they have said just Jesse plus guest? Or would they have said...
If you can make entry into a house, you're noted in the minutes. So-and-so was a visitor at on this time. So you're entered in the minutes. So basically, you're on the roll of being there that night. So, yes, they can figure out wherever he went, wherever he stopped through as a traveling man. Not to give too much.
Oh, wow.
But,
that's exactly right.
So that's cool. That's cool because that's where just as the stuff is just as you guys have found. I mean, obviously, the way you described his diary is exactly how I would expect somebody who's gone through so many. Through the brutality of the Civil War, through the brutality of him from 14 on up, just everything he's experienced. I would not expect the Renaissance man to have flowery language, to be colorful in his description. I would expect just the straightforward business. I went here, next. I went here, next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he did drop hints in his diary, like he put his signature. It was in his handwriting, J. James. There were little hints throughout his journal too. Interesting. He had a lot of little things in there that made us question, like, why would that be in there?
And that's where I was wondering. It's like, because how I got to that was like with, like code, something could describe like locations, because that's what I said. I don't expect him to be, really, just trying to find the right word. I don't want to say like flamboyant. I don't expect him to be like come up with this overly poetic, like, way of describing where I might have put something. I would just be more like, just something like, I don't even know what that means. Well, maybe that's the code of where that squirrel cache is possibly located. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so
he had a lot of little illustrations in his there, like in his journal. Like there was one with the sun, and it looked like a figure with a top hat. We're still trying to figure out that one.
Yeah. That was one of the treasure maps that had passed down through the family. And then, like in the journal, he drew an eagle with a heart on its chest and an arrow in its talons, just different things. And that would be on the same page. There was a lot of code written. So,
well then. Oh, that's and I'm thinking of I'm like, wow, that is crazy. Just being, I mean, who doesn't like a good treasure map story, even from the time of growing up? It's just like,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, the buried treasure. Let's go dig in the backyard and have mom and dad mad at us.
Got a bunch of little rabbit holes back there.
There's surely somebody buried something in my yard. You guys are digging a hole. Yeah. No, that's great. So definitely, like I said, we want to have you guys back on, a little down the road, because when we get some time, because I want to talk to you about your other book.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah, Jesse James' Tupelo Treasure. So we want to have you guys.
We could talk about this all day, so we would love it.
Exactly. And that was kind of where I just, as we're going on, I think what we'll do is because the 831, we can go long on that one, on that show. So what we'll do is probably we'll bring you in on that later one, and then if we keep going, like we keep finding stuff, like I said, then there's no like, okay, we got to wrap it up. We'll just be able to keep rolling with you guys.
Okay.
Definitely.
Thanks for having us on the show. I really appreciate it.
I can't thank you enough.
Me too. We loved it.
Yeah. And so everybody, The Mysterious Life and Fake Death of Jesse James. I'm going to do this hopefully the light to see. Yep.
That's awesome.
Book.
Maybe next time I can have a beard grown. So.
we recommend it, like we tell everybody, especially if you don't want the itchy, scratchy one. It's like if you use a beard oil product, especially like this, it's actually really soft. Like I said, I put on there, and you can actually, it's not scratchy. And like I said, nobody likes to snuggle up to steal wool.
Yeah,
they want something nice and soft. But everybody, go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you shop for your books. I got this Monday afternoon, and I'm already on page. I think I'm almost at chapter 6.
Okay,
nice.
Good.
So I really recommend it. It's unfortunately the camera, it's really hard to see, but I mean, there are so many photographs. There's so many, historical records and stuff that you guys have taken photos of. You've shown like pictures
the map
and
in there, so I can go to Texas and just have fun digging.
I'm going to the military. I'm trying to get on the base.
So
it belongs.
You guys,
we'll
you
go
guys
with
have
you.
done,
No.
yeah, you guys have done meticulous research on this book. I mean, this is not something that was in any way hastily put together, and I can't compliment you guys enough on what I've read and just the hard work. It definitely looks like you guys have put into it, and especially obviously there's going to be some passion being the great grandchildren.
Yeah.
But it doesn't read that way. This doesn't read as a puff piece of family members trying to make their relative look positive, because in so many instances you guys have said, no, he did bad things.
He did.
Yeah, this wasn't an angel in any way.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a bad guy, but this is why. And like I said, I go from being like, oh dude, he was a bad guy that just robbed people, to I get how this would happen. I really get how somebody can go from being an innocent, as innocent as you can be in the pioneer days of, at 14, to where you are, a notorious outlaw that people in Germany love.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. So, after you're done with your Hasselhoff festival, you're heading over. As you're playing Hasselhoff's record, and you're
I love Germany.
Oh man! But everybody, like I said, please pick up the book. Show these guys some love. Like I said, is there anything that you guys want to plug site-wise for people to go get more information, to find out more about you two?
Well, you can go to, I've got a website, authordanduke.com, but the one I really love is the one I keep going, my mother's old website. We've kept that going, and that's jessewjames.com. So if you want to learn more about Jesse, you can go to jessewjames.com. And our books, I've kind of slacked off on my website lately. I need to clean it up a little, but it's just authordanduke.com. You can find me on Twitter. You can find Teresa on Twitter. Both of us are on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. So
yeah, I think that's one of the sites right there, and you guys can see a better picture of the book right there too.
Yeah,
you might just watch. But yeah, The Mysterious Life and Fake Death of Jesse James, which is based on family records, forensic evidence, and his personal journals, written and researched by Daniel J. Duke and Teresa F. Duke. Thank you guys so much. Well, you guys are always welcome back on.
Thank you for having us.
And
yeah, I'm
Traveler,
glad you guys I'm glad you had a good time. When I told you,
I loved it.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
what you guys have.
we will look forward to being back.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Great. We appreciate that so much. And I will, in the process, I will pick up Jesse James and the Templar Treasure and make so I did my work.
And thank you, Traveler, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Dan, Teresa, thanks again. Appreciate it. Have a great night, and we will talk soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
And be safe during the hurricanes.
Yeah.
COVID, hurricanes. We got a double win.
We're ready for
coming
this.
out. We got COVID and we got hurricanes. So
everybody in Florida just needs to start burning sage. We just need
No, we don't have enough stage for that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
All right. So, guys, awesome interview.
So
fantastic. That was just a blast. I can't thank them enough for coming on.
Our listeners needs to send me some money because I don't know what to do now. Go look for treasure or go look for the ocean. Go search the ocean for mysterious creatures.
Well, you were asking for something to put on the back behind you. It needs to be a bookshelf now.
No, you're still young
right.
to be you're still young to be a millionaire, Austin. So shave your beard, go join the army, and tell them you want to go to Texas, Fort Hood. I want to go to Fort Hood, Texas, and this is the baddest metal detector you can. And be like beep 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 beep. I got it.
You got it strapped to your chest, and you're just going around doing push-ups, random push-ups. Just
beep, beep.
If I quit my job and you see me leaving the state with my truck and a what do you call it, a rubber tire, don't question me. You know where I'm going. I'm just gonna travel across Texas with my rubber tire and just keep digging everywhere.
Yeah, but everybody, like I said, once again, please pick up the book. It is fantastic. I mean, it is just. Like I said, they've got his journal in here as well. They have the whole thing as an appendix. So all of the notations, all through the years that he was writing this journal. So it's a really well done book. I'm glad I picked that up. And it's really inexpensive. I think it's $1 cheaper to get it Kindle. So spend the extra $1 and just get the book.
Yeah, exactly. It gets them more money too, I think. So
yeah, and like I said, but I said it was next day delivery. Great stuff.
I just got my book a couple days ago with Chronos Rising, and there's 6 books in those series. Man, we gotta stop this.
I know. I have this whole wall of books from all this stuff. But this was brought to you by Broad's Beard Care. Amazing beard oil. Go to broadsbeardcare.com. Use promo code 3beards with a capital B, and you're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping as always. And while you're there, check out our signature blend that was crafted by Kelly for us in mind. You buy a bottle of that, not only are you supporting a local craftsman who's making high quality beard oil, you're also supporting us at the same time. So please check that out and think about buying a bottle of that. Nancy Burt Nanny Cakes at Nanny Cakes 407 on Facebook or 407-923-2898. Thank you, Austin, for leaving that up there. Yeah, in Central Florida area, she will get your cake needs. And if you mention 3 Beards, you're also going to get 15% off your cake. If you're outside the Central Florida area, you are going to have a wonderful cake ball.
Yeah.
It will taste amazing.
Won't look good because you know how people are delivering, but it'll taste amazing. Just honestly, just take a spoon.
Yep,
you're good. Don't worry.
Go to patreon.com/3 Beards Podcast. Become a Patreon member for the 3 Beards Podcast, and you will be entered into the Sticker of the Month Club. And as we come up with stickers, you are going to get one.
Yeah, like 10 stickers already lined up, man.
Yeah, so just join that, and we'll go there. Check us out on YouTube channel 3 Beards Podcast. Subscribe, and you will be able to keep us 3 bearded lovelies in your life, and we will appreciate you ever so much for it. But everybody, thanks again for watching. Really appreciate it. We will see you guys on the next show. Have a great night. We will see you later. Good night.